welcome back to Finding a Fourth, your home for all things Commander. I'm Peyton, and around here we celebrate the politics, power plays, and legendary moments that make Commander the best format in Magic. Today we're covering Hakbal, one of my favorite decks, and it's pretty straightforward. It's a merfolk deck. It isn't trying to do anything too out of the box, but I think the reason why Hakbal remains one of I think it's the best Simic commander. I'll double check that. It's the most popular Civic commander as far as EDH Rec is concerned, and I think there's a reason why. He's very, very Simic. It's card draw slash putting lands into play, but with the added synergy of Merfolk, so I think it makes for a really cool deck. I'm running a couple of cards that you might not see in your typical Hawkball list, but otherwise I think mine's pretty straightforward, but I still think it's worth mentioning. I love talking about decks that are kind of straightforward. Not every deck needs to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So that's kind of what we're going to do today with Hawkball. Just to touch base on Hawkball himself, he is great at two things, and those two things are what Simic does best: ramp and card draw. He comes printed with that ability just on his own. So if you ignore the exploring part, he does on attack. You can either put a land into play untapped, super nice, or you draw a card. So again, that's everything Simic wants to be doing. That's basically Simic in a nutshell. So add into that the fact that he explores all your merfolks on combat. He's just a great captain of a Simic merfolk deck. There are so many merfolk that also really help with this strategy. Merfolk are like the quintessential Simic type at the moment. I think they really embody just everything Simic wants to be doing. They are not your typical like green big stompy kind of effects, but they do grow really big in Hawkball decks. I think that's what Merfolk are really missing to establish themselves as like a viable type, is kind of the big hitting power that green is so good at. But Hawkball really kind of fixes that for us. The theme of the deck, surprise, surprise, is Merfolk. It's ramp, 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 and then swing with our big Merfolk. Like I said, we're not really reinventing the wheel here as far as like other Simic decks or what Simic decks kind of want to be doing on a regular basis. It's a pretty straightforward strategy, which is why I like it. I think Hawkball is one of those decks. As a precon, it's one of the best precons I think you can give to a beginner player because it's not overly complex. The explore mechanic can get a little iffy, especially if the more merfolk you have, but it's a pretty simple concept to learn, and so I think it's a really, really strong beginner-friendly deck that a lot of new players are going to really be like, wow, this is such a cool card slash, if they're new to the game, right? I think it's a great way to introduce them to Magic, like card draw, ramp, big, cool, sweet creatures to swing with. It's a recipe for a great beginner-friendly deck. Also think it's just a fun deck to pilot for people who have been playing the game, such as myself. Sometimes it's just, I don't want to think too hard. I'm going to play Merfolk and swing. So we're just going to go over some of the pros and the cons of the deck. Like always, not every deck is perfect, so we will usually have plenty of mana to cast Hawkball, inevitably when he gets removed. He is kind of like the engine to the whole deck, so people will try to remove Hawkball, and luckily we have access to green, so we just will be ramping so hard we'll just cast him again. All the merfolk also have natural synergy. That's just the way that Magic goes with these typal decks, is that they all tend to work together and tend to work towards the same goal. So all the merfolk that we play will naturally synergize together. They have natural card advantage built in. Hawkball himself is really good card advantage. After we've used him to ramp a ton, we don't really need him to ramp anymore. We can just use him as card draw. And the explore mechanic that Hawkball provides also helps us kind of dig through the deck, because we can be really aggressive with those explores, putting a bunch of stuff into the graveyard to kind of dig for our win cons once we're at a board state that we're happy with. Merfolk do not naturally come with a ton of evasion. The most common one I think you'll see is some island walk, but they don't really come with like trample or flying, despite being in green and blue. Colors notorious for both of those keywords, but there are ways to give them those keywords, so we're not in a huge pitfall there, but just know that you can't just run a bunch of merfolk without a bunch of support and expect to really not and expect to get through, because people will just be able to block the damage easily. Without Hawkball, the deck can stall a little bit. He is a big linchpin for kind of the deck working. and that's just because the deck relies so heavily on his Explorer to really make them big threats. Without him, the merfolk don't grow quite as fast and don't actually get to explore, so you don't get to churn through your deck. So he can kind of be, like I said, the linchpin to the deck, the pitfall. But again, we can cast him a bunch of times. He costs 4, 6, even 8 mana. Sorry, yeah, 6, and then 8 mana. Not too crazy to do, but it can happen. So just watch out for that. The deck can be a little bit slow to start, only because it doesn't start getting threatening until you start getting, the more merfolk you get, the more you can start digging, right? If you have 2 merfolk, you're only going to maybe dig 2 cards deep. Once you have 8 merfolk, then you're digging 8 cards deep, so the card advantage is much better. Maybe not card selection is much better. You can really dig, really churn through your deck much faster. And again, merfolk are not the best flyers. They are so easily blocked sometimes. It's so frustrating. It's one of the parts of the deck that I really tried to like make not a con anymore, because they're just so easily blocked, and none, like I said, none of the really valuable merfolk come with enough evasion to really cement themselves as like, oh, they can do it on their own, right? They need a lot of supporting pieces to really do what they want to do, which is swing out for combat damage. This deck is not trying to combo out. This deck isn't trying to do anything too crazy. It's literally just battle cruiser magic with swinging with big creatures. So um, evasion is like a lot of our key support here is like trying to get evasion for these merfolk. We'll talk about the interaction that we're running in the deck. It is pretty, not, I wouldn't say the word straightforward. We're running some kind of off the wall pieces only because they tend to synergize with our strategies a little bit more than like your normal blue counterspell protection. They have like a good shout out is Ripples of Potential. It lets us proliferate, so all of our counters that we're generating with our Explore trigger, we can then phase those permanents out. So it's a really nice way to bounce our whole, or phase our whole board out. So if somebody's trying to board wipe or remove a couple of our key pieces, we can just phase those out. And phasing out is really nice. And again, synergizes with our the proliferating synergizes with our +1/+1 counter strategy. Repulsive Mutation is another one that you can either use it, you don't have to put any into the X for you to get value out of it, because you can guarantee that your creature is going to be big, right? So if Hakbal comes down, he's like a 5/5. After a couple explores, they're gonna have to pay 5 to not have their spell countered. Most people are not gonna have that kind of mana sitting up after casting a spell. So Repulsive Mutation is great. It's also really good because you can pump a creature in addition to trying to counter someone's spell. So it's good. Again, it works with our +1/+1 synergy. We're running Heroic Intervention, and that's just because the key to this is protecting our whole board. We're not just protecting one piece of it. While Hakbal is like the most important piece at times, it really is about the whole board altogether, because Hakbal by himself doesn't really do a ton for us. It really is about having as many merfolks as possible and having all of them protected at the same time, because they're all going to grow together. So it's key to protect the whole board, not just one piece. The last shout out is Tishana's Tidebinder. I think this is a super underrated card. I think it is extremely cool the way that it can get around protection or hexproof, shroud. The pitfall is that it has to target an ability, so somebody has to put an ability on the stack that is part of a creature that you're trying to stop. But I've never run into an issue of finding these abilities. There's no shortage of powerful abilities in Magic, and Tishana's Tidebinder is really good at just stopping that card in that instance and then for all future instances. So she eats removal very quickly, but it's much better for her to eat the removal than something like Hawkball or some of our other key pieces later on. Surprise, surprise, outside of Hawkball, we're running pretty basic stuff, pretty standard green ramp. I have added Open the Way since it's very easy to get to 6 mana in Hawkball, so we're able to cast Open the Way like a little earlier than we normally would, and basically, as you see here, I've kind of laid out, like, cast him turn 3, turn 4 attack, Cheetah Land to play with his attack trigger, and we have 6 mana to cast Open the Way on, we have 6 mana to cast Open the Way, so on turn 5, we're untapping with 10 plus mana. That is just super strong. Other decks, obviously, cannot do that reliably, but Hawkball can, which is really nice. I've also thrown in the kind of Tron lands since Hawkball is really good at digging in the deck, and we can cheat them into play with his ability. So it's really, really nice. I will go into more later about kind of why these ended up in the deck and specifically like how I kind of got into this mana base. But I've had a ton of success with the Tron lands. I think they're great. I know people are like, you could basically run them in every deck and they'd probably find success, but Hawkball seems really good. The deck in general seems really good at digging through the whole library. I get through a chunk of the library pretty consistently, so I threw the Tron lands in here and they've done me well so far. Hawkball again is the key piece to our draw, but we have tons of other draw synergies in the deck. That's one thing merfolk are pretty good at. Cold Ice Selkie is a great shout out because she will draw cards based off of her power. Obviously, Hawkball will explore the Cold Ice Selkie, so it'll grow over the course of the game. So we start drawing. The great thing about a lot of our damage, a lot of our card draw being tied to like our creatures doing combat damage, is that it really makes our opponents want to block because they want to deny us the card draw, but usually they lose a creature in the process because our creatures are just so big and so, you know, they the creature will die. Our opponent's creatures will die when they block. So yes, they're denying us the card draw, but we're also taking care of our opponent's creatures. So it's kind of cool sometimes when you don't have evasion because it forces our opponents to block. But there are other ways like Kindred Discovery to draw a bunch of cards. The Great Henge is a great shout out for just card draw. It does kind of a little bit of everything, to be honest, but the Great Henge is great card draw. But again, Hawkball kind of does our ramp and our card draw in the command zone, so he's kind of the linchpin. We'll keep using that word a ton to refer to Hawkball. Some of our kind of odd cards that we're running that again you may not see in your normal Hawkball list is Omo, Queen of Isuva. It's funny because like I said, I would mention about the Tron lands. The reason why the Tron lands ended up in Hawkball is because I had the Omo Precon, which came with all the Tron lands. It came with a ton of really good. It had a really good mana base for a Precon, and the more I played Omo, the more I was like, God, this deck is so consistently good at just getting a bunch of mana out, despite having kind of a restriction on like, oh, you need all these different types of lands. And I was like, I wonder if I just threw this mana base like kind of halfway into Hawkball. So I kind of combined the two mana bases, and then I thought, why don't I just throw Omo in? Because Omo kind of synergizes what we want to do with Hawkball. She's able to turn either our opponent's lands into islands for Island Walk, which is really cool. That's kind of like an unused tech, I think, in the Omo side of things. Most people would target their own lands, but we can also target opponent lands with her everything counter, and she can also turn our non-merfolk creatures into merfolks to help them explore. This doesn't come up a huge ton because there aren't a ton of like non-merfolks in the deck. Two of them are on screen as well, so we have Koma and the Glacier Godma, but so she's able to turn those into merfolk as well, so they can benefit from the Hawkball Explorer. Just a little funny little interaction. It's not like a game-breaking card. She's not like, wow, almost just turning this deck into such a great, amazing deck. But she's never bad for the deck either. She at least can turn herself into a merfolk so she can start exploring. You know, kind of a cheeky play there. Koma is just a generic Simic win con. That was kind of one of the things I noticed with Hawkball was, again, kind of closing out games. He gets a lot of value and he builds great boards, but it's hard to close out a game. So I was like, how can I find a win con? And the answer that every Simic player ends on is put Koma in the deck. He can tap down opponent blockers to help our merfolk get in. He's also good at stopping kind of our opponent's abilities by using him as more of a control piece. So, Omo can turn him into a merfolk, so he can start exploring. So kind of cool. The Glacier Godma is kind of a newer card since Edge of Eternities that I've put in that will give us a little boost when we attack. Just really cool because it gives our board vigilance, which is really nice because that's another part of like the Hawkball weakness is that you want to swing out with him, but you leave yourself open to the crackback. So Glacier Godma is great. And it's cool because on Hawkball, hopefully you play a land for turn, and then you can also put a land into play off Hawkball's ability, which will pump your board +2/+2, which is really, really nice. Off already big creatures. It itself has trample. Again, you could turn it into a merfolk with Omo if you wanted to. So, really cool synergy there. Great card. Have been putting it to a lot of decks. We'll talk about some of the key cards. The cards that I really think take this into like a really, really cool space. Ninkenzel is one of our best creatures in the deck. For only 2 mana, her and Hakbal synergize so well together that I'm surprised that they. I wish I could give them partner or something because they're made for each other. Um, every time you explore, Nickensell lets you dump a land out, and if you explore a land, she lets you put a land into play tapped. Or if you explore anything else, you put a counter on Nickensell. So any other time your merfolk are exploring, Nickensell is basically exploring with them, and she does it. She puts a bunch of lands into play. She puts a bunch of counters on herself. It is. I have grown her from a 2/3 to a 13/14 in one turn very very easily, and synergizes really well with our Glacial Godmaw card from before because again every land that you put into play will pump everyone +1/+1, and it will give them haste so Nickensell can swing out the turn she comes down. Really really cool. Again, no evasion, so hopefully your opponents don't have blockers and or you have some sort of evasion otherwise, but really cool card, really strong card. Marrow Commerce is a really cool shout out because it will give our merfolk pseudo vigilance. Like I said, one of the key parts of this deck is that you'll swing out, you'll die on the crackback because all your merfolk swung out. This lets us untap all of our merfolk on the end step, so we can safely swing out and not have to worry about crackback because now all of our big creatures are untapped. And the great thing is that it is tutorable because it is a typal enchantment. So cards that say search your library for a merfolk card, this can be searched with that, and it's really useful. There's like 2 or 3 of those in the deck, I think. So this is usually my go-to when I tutor for a card because it's just so good. It helps us trigger the Deeproot Pilgrimage, which is an enchantment that whenever a merfolk becomes tapped, you create a merfolk. So it's really key because you want to be able to combo with that card. That card combo is like super with a lot of other cards. We'll talk about that, but so it's just key that we don't nombo ourselves with some of these cards. Topography Tracker is our next key card, and that's just because it lets everything explore twice. That explore is like kind of the, like I said, the key to the deck. It's part of what makes Hakbal so good. So being able to do everything twice is great. It's like a roaming throne effect, and with like something like Nickensell out, you're just gonna it's insane how big Nickensell can get with double explore, double Hakbal triggers. So kind of just gonna go over the basic game plan of the deck again, kind of the what are we trying to do during the game. The plan: get Hakbal out as soon as possible and start ramping. Use his attack trigger to put lands out into play. I know it's tempting to do the card draw because card draw is so good, but get mana out because people are going to start removing him and you're going to need mana to recast him because again he's just so pivotal to the deck. If you don't have any lands in hand, obviously draw the card. There's no, you can't put a land into play if you don't have one, so not bad options. But early game, if you have the lands in hand, put those out. Our next plan is that with all this mana that we're dumping out, we're going to go wide. So we're going to try to deploy as many merfolk as we can as early as possible. The more merfolk we have, the more explore triggers we have, which means we can start digging through more of our deck to search for our win cons. Aggressively explore. I put a lot of cards into the graveyard because it, unless it's like a win con or like something really, really pivotal that we need right now, bin it. It's better to dig for the better cards in our deck than keep like a mid card. Like I know it's tempting when you see the hardened scales, like, oh, I'll get double counters next turn. Like, no, bin it, move on. Like we're digging for the bigger pieces because the information off the Explorer is like revealed, right? It is table knowledge. So if you reveal the hardened scales, it sounds scary and people are going to be like, oh, well, I want to stop that, or oh, I want to. Now, the Hakbal player is going to get double counters. Oh, that's so scary. Let's swing out at them. It's like, well, I don't want to get swung out on over a hardened scales. I'd rather get swung out on because I revealed a coma. That's at least worth swinging at me for. And then once I get the coma out, everyone's just like, well, now we're screwed. So to me, like, the information's revealed. Don't let people get scared over like a silly little mid value piece. Dig for the win cons. Dig for those pivotal pieces because those are the ones that are going to get scared. People are going to be scared of you anyway. Might as well make them extra scared of you. So now we'll kind of talk about the overall win conditions of the deck. Again, I said that before the pre-con right out of the box kind of struggled with this, which is that kind of closing out the games. So I threw in Crater Hoof because Obviously, our plan is to go wide with big creatures. If we can give those creatures trample and pump them up by more, why not? So the Crater Hoof made it into the deck. Surprise, surprise, green win con. Um, Herald of Secret Streams is kind of like the other option to this. It just makes all of our creatures unblockable, so we don't have to worry about blockers anymore. It's a one-time. It's uh, I say a one-time effect as in like it's one of those only effects. It's one of the only effects in the deck that does this. Most of the other effects give trample or some sort of other evasion. Um, but Herald of Secret Streams is really, really nice. People usually see this and say, "Oh no, it's coming." And then before I was talking about like our Deep Root Pilgrimage kind of combo and Nombo situation with the Marrow Commerce, because we want to be able to trigger the Deep Root Pilgrimage because it does go infinite with Wonderwine Prophets. This is, like I said, a very kind of late game combo because it does require a lot of setup. You have to have some sort of evasion on the Wonderwine Prophets. Again, Island Walk or Unblockable. And that's just because it can't just be trample because people will block it and try to kill it, and you're going to be repeatedly attacking in combat. So it has to not be able to take damage, otherwise it'll just die eventually, and then you won't take infinite turns. But basically, the combo is Wonderwine Prophet will attack. It deals combat damage to a player. You may sacrifice a merfolk. So every time you tap the Wonderwine Prophets to go to combat, you'd take an extra turn if you sacrifice a merfolk. So every time you tap the Wonderwine Prophet, you'll create a merfolk off of Deep Root Pilgrimage, which you can then stack to his trigger to take the extra turn. Repeat, repeat, repeat. So as I said, you need some sort of unblockable, some sort of evasion. And kind of by the time you have this evasion, you should pretty much already be winning because you should have enough power on board to clear the table. But again, Wonderwine Prophet's just like an iconic merfolk card, so I included it here. But like I said, it does require a lot of setup. Wonderwine Prophets is 6 mana. It doesn't have haste. It doesn't have natural evasion. You have to have a merfolk to sack to it to cast it because it has champion of merfolk. So it takes a lot of pieces, and it's not perfect. It's not terrible. It's not terribly important to include. I think this could be a first cut easily because I've never done it in a game before, so it's not really that great. But again, Wandering Prophets is I had this card from a previous deck that was not even Merfolk related, and so I was like, you know what, let me throw it on Hawkball because we need a win con. And that's basically it. I think, like I said, Simic, good stuff. Slash Merfolk is kind of the Hawkball game. Um, it's a cool deck. Like I said, it's kind of the deck I choose when I'm not really looking to think too hard. It doesn't require a lot of, like, oh, let me remember the line. Like, oh, let me like figure out. Let me see. Like, oh, what's the card I should tutor for? Again, I basically tutor for Marrow Commerce every time because that's a cool card. And if I already have Marrow Commerce, then I just go get Ninkenzel or Topography Tracker or some other card like that. But doesn't take a lot of thought process to play Hawkball. It's just a straightforward kind of I don't want to say basic deck, but again, it's not doing anything crazy. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just do what Simic does best, which is draw cards and play a lot of lands. So great deck. Awesome card. Check it out. I'll leave the deck list in the description. You can kind of see some of the other pieces that I'm running. Like I said, this is kind of my, if I had to pick a deck, it's like, oh, what's the best deck to give to like a beginner? This one would be it because it's fun. I think people would enjoy playing a very basic, big, swingy, explore merfolk deck. So Hawkball is him. So thank you for joining us on Finding a Fourth. If you enjoyed this deck tech, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment about what you think about Hawkball, what you think, about Simic decks in general. I know Simic is kind of the one of the most hated color combinations for good reason. It does a lot of really great things very easily, but let me know. What do you think about Hawkball? And remember, whether you've got a full pod or you're still searching for that last player, you can always come hang out with us. Until next time.